Hello everybody and welcome to Astrology for Beginners. I'm Nigel St. James. Today we are going to look at the mystical meaning of the symbol for Scorpio. And this is video number 14 of 30 in the series, which you can find on the playlist on my channel very simply. It's just entitled Astrology for Beginners, and you can dive in and watch at your convenience. Now Scorpio, you may know, has three forms: that of the scorpion itself. It also has the form of a snake, which is more of a fluid. The scorpion can be thought of as being hard. The snake can be thought of as being fluid or water, and in its exalted form, you see the eagle. So there are three forms of Scorpio, and the eagle, of course, representing air. So the only element that's missing, of course, is fire. But by and large, the symbol that you find most often is this one for Scorpio, and that's quite straightforward. Now, Scorpio is the eighth impulse, and it shows the divine potential. The cosmic creative energy now realizes its capacity for expansion, and the material sheaths or coverings of the soul begin to break apart and to fall apart. You'll remember that when we got into Libra, we were totally immersed. The soul was totally immersed in matter. Now, with the realization of the soul's potential, it then begins to desire to unveil itself, to show its true self. Now, having crossed the Libra stage, where the divine spark is totally immersed in the deepest level of involution. And you recall from the last video that I was saying that involution is that process where spirit comes from the common divinity, or the world soul. Anima mundi is another word, as you recall from a previous video, that it immerses itself into spirit. That's involution. And then its journey to make its way out again, that's evolution. Well, having crossed the Libra stage, two opposing forces in Scorpio excuse me, are at hand, and that is the spiritual and the material, because they were blended together in Libra. So the soul wants to escape its material encasement, and the soul then starts to reshape itself, to look for ways to expand. And during this period, as it tries to break free of the material sheaths, psychological problems and conflicts can arise as the sort of the birth pangs of being reborn. Now, let's have a look at Scorpio again. You might remember when we did Virgo, that this is very similar, isn't it? Everything is the same in Scorpio except for this bit, and I'll take this tail off, which runs up here. Let me just lean forward. Virgo, as you recall, had this cross coming down at the end of it. That's the only difference, whereas Scorpio has this tail that goes up at this con. Now, incidentally, you might see in some depictions of the glyph that the tail, and I'm using my left hand here, so forgive me, that the glyph is just said to go sideways, like the arrow is just said to go sideways like that. That's not the case. That just looks like somebody who's had too much to drink and who, well, you can imagine. It actually goes up. And the reason why it's going up is because that is the mystical association with, of course, that's a straight line there. Now in Virgo, of course, the energy was nailed to the cross. In fact, I'll rub that out because I'll do you justice of a more productive diagram. The energy in Virgo, as you recall from video 1 or 2, I think, where you see a cross, that means matter. So the energy there is nailed to the cross of matter. Well, in Scorpio, of course, that's not there. There is instead the arrow. And the arrow, as I say, comes down at the bottom and it points up. And so if you see anything pointing to the side, that's just the wrong way of depicting it. So this arrow goes to the side. Now, The arrow points to the urge for spiritual development by the time that we get to the 8th impulse. The 8th zodiac impulse by itself, is neutral. It is the material sheaths which are around the soul that are important at this time. Unless they are kind of crystalline, unless you can see through them, the soul will break and shatter, and there'll be difficulty. There could be the exaggeration of the ego and a tendency towards destruction. But with the release of this secret power, therefore, we have linked it with a built-up ego sense. And what's happening here is that as the soul begins to break the confines of matter, there is, in a sense, a death, and the soul then looks to be born again. See, there's nothing new under the sun. Seeks to be born again, this time back into its real self. That is why, incidentally, on the astrology wheel, you'll often see houses. There'll be different astrology signs assigned to different houses. The 8th house is generally said to be the house of death and transformation. Well, 8 is the impulse of Scorpio, and so that's where this understanding of death and transformation comes. Under the Scorpio impulse, the cosmic you is struggling to release yourself from the material debris in which you have found yourself covered, and you now begin your cosmic resurrection. So that's it for Scorpio. The next one is Sagittarius, and I look forward to seeing you then. And until then, remember that you are a legend. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.